Alright folks, so this is going to be a quick tutorial, hopefully quick, on how I use like masks and submaterial tool and some other things in Garry's mod for the purposes of scene building and rendering to add a little bit more detail, a little bit more visual intrigue to some of your projects that you're working on. So for sake of this tutorial, all I've done is I took one of the plastic block props that comes in gmod, and I use the submaterial tool to apply this concrete texture to it, just to add something to work off of. And I should mention for this tutorial, you're going to need the submaterial tool and the glow material tool. I will link both of them in the description for that. You can get your hands on those. As far as the render goes, all I did, I'm not going to get crazy detailed here. All this is a sun layer and an overhead ambience layer. This process will work no matter how big or complicated or intricate your scene is, as long as you can get into submaterial, the prop or effect or whatever you're working with, this should work. So to start off with, the first thing we're going to need is to make a mask with this. And this is where that submaterial, that glow material is going to come in handy. It's labeled as light/white in the submaterial folder. So all we're going to do is take that, apply it to our wall or prop or whatever it is we're working with, go back into our camera view, and then when we disable matte full bright, you can see that it's still lit, it's still glowing, so that way we can use this as a perfect mask in Photoshop, so we don't have to sit there and try to do it with a pen tool or whatever. And then just do poster size, whatever poster you're working with, 1 or 2 or what have you. For the sake of this tutorial, I did 2. Go into our screenshots folder and grab that one that we just got and throw it in here. And that's that part done. Now go back into Garry's mod, and we're gonna clear this one and just go through and find a material that you want. And for sake of this, let's say we're doing like some kind of, mossy or overgrown or kind of dirt covered wall or something. So yeah, that could work. I mean, it's not actual moss, but for our purposes, it will work. Now, leaving it completely lit, don't turn off matte full bright or anything, just go back in. Another poster 2 command. Jump back in to your screenshots folder and toss that one here. So it loads. Okay, now we're going to select the mask that we created, this one, and we're going to hit Control A to select it, Control C to copy it, go up here, select the new material, apply a mask, then Alt left click on that new mask, because otherwise if you just left click it won't select it. Control V to copy it, and then we can go and disable that original mask, so we're working with this new material. Now, as you can see, this doesn't look natural, it doesn't look right. This is where you start to mess with blending modes, just to figure out what looks right, what works for your scene. And for this, and here's the thing, a lot of these aren't going to work, or not work, but they're not going to look right. So it's going to come down to just trial error, go through them, see what you like, see what works well. So for the sake of this, I kind of both those look pretty similar. Let's go with the overlay. Okay, so now you can kind of see that it looks like it's actually on the prop or the material, while still showing a little bit of what's through. This isn't a super great example, but if you adjust the opacity, you can kind of see what's going on underneath. There's a lot of contrast between these two materials, so the one kind of drowns out the other. But you can either adjust the opacity, or the nice thing is, because this is masked, we can manually edit that mask. So let's say I go into the brush mode, I have this powder brush selected, and the way the masks work in Photoshop is that anything that's black will disappear, anything that's white will stay visible. So since I have this mask here, I want to get rid of some of that material so you can see what's underneath. If it would let me. Cancel. Okay, make sure you have the mask selected, not the object. And we'll just start going through and kind of painting over here. And you can kind of see how this starts to add a little bit more of a little bit more detail, makes it a little bit more just interesting to look at, and then you can adjust the hardness of the brush. So that's one way to do it, is using in-game submaterials to apply onto an existing object. The other option is if you have some textures, like I do here, let's say I want to add like some mud sort of color to this. Yeah, this one should work. So boom. You go in here, you got your mud texture, whatever this is. I think it's supposed to be like rust or whatever, but work for our purposes. The only thing to remember if you're going to be using image or textured images is that they're flat, generally speaking. So you have to adjust them so that it matches the perspective of whatever object you're working on in your scene. So obviously this one tilted slightly away from the camera, slight upward angle, blah, blah, blah. This doesn't have to be perfect, it just has to be close enough. But let's say I'll make that a little bit bigger and then adjust the perspective so it matches that one a little bit more. Again, it doesn't have to be absolutely perfect. I'm being very nitpicky here, but okay, good enough. I'm not gonna mess with it. So we'll go back, since we still have this mask here that we used originally, I'm just gonna do the same process as before, Control A, Control C, apply a mask, Alt left click and apply it. Cool. And then we can just start to go through and figure out, okay, what works, what doesn't here. And you know, for this one, I actually kind of the way it'll look, yeah, I like the overlay. Oh, not normal. I like the overlay, I kind of like how that looks. And sometimes you can change the, depending on what materials you're working with and what blending modes and stuff, you can change the order of them so they work, so they change how they look a little bit. So for sake of this one, let's just go in and start, okay, you know, taking some of that off so it's not as pronounced, and then, you know, add a little bit more in here. Got kind of like some generic concrete textures in here once it would load. Go through here, adjust the perspective slightly, change the scale. And yeah, you can just keep on doing this with as many textures as you like, with as many, you know, layering them up and editing them and reducing the, or, you know, playing with the masks to make them look a little bit different. But yeah, that's the general process. It's really not that hard. A lot of it's going to come down to just trial and error. There's no secrets or tricks here. It's literally just play around with it, see what works, what doesn't. Sometimes you're going to have to try different materials depending on what you're trying to do and all the things you're trying to accomplish. The one trick I would say is that some materials, like the more contrast you have between materials, the more, obviously, the more vibrant it will be when you apply it. But let's say I have that blank concrete texture, you know, just these two, and then if I just had this one, that one shows up okay, but obviously there's not a ton of detail there. So the more contrast you have between materials, the more it will show up. But again, trial and error. Keep messing with it. If you have any questions, let me know. I'll do what I can to help. So, all right. Hope you have a good one.